Picture waking up to find your house on fire, your children trapped inside, and after the flames die down, firefighters searching the wreckage can't find a single bone. Not one skull, not one rib, nothing at all. Human bones are supposed to survive fires hot enough to melt steel beams. So where did 5 children go? This nightmare happened on Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small coal town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, to a hard-working family named Sodder. What followed still haunts investigators today. George and Ginny Sodder were Italian immigrants who'd built a good life together, a small coal trucking business, a sturdy 2-story farmhouse, and 10 children who filled every room with noise. That December night, the house smelled like pine needles and roasting chestnuts. The younger kids begged to stay up late, far too excited about Christmas morning to fall asleep. Earlier that same day, a stranger had knocked on the door asking about life insurance. Before leaving, he said something strange, that the house would burn and the children would die. George brushed the comment off as an aggressive, pushy sales pitch at the time. By morning, though, he'd replay those exact words over and over, wondering what the stranger meant. Ginny tucked all the children in a bed around 10 o'clock that night. She checked on them once more before turning in herself. Everything still felt completely ordinary, completely safe. Just after 1 in the morning, the telephone rang loudly. A woman's voice, unfamiliar and laughing oddly, asked for a name that meant absolutely nothing to anyone in the house. Confused, Ginny hung up the phone and noticed every downstairs light was still burning, like someone had left them on deliberately. Then, faintly, she caught the smell of smoke. She ran downstairs and saw flames already crawling up the wall near George's home office. Within minutes, fire was tearing through the house far faster than any ordinary blaze should. George sprinted upstairs, screaming every child's name into the smoke. Scrambled out safely into the yard. 5 never made it down at all: Maurice, Martin, Louis, Jenny, and little Betty. He ran outside for the tall ladder that always leaned against the house, kept ready for exactly this kind of emergency. It wasn't there anymore. It had simply vanished. He grabbed a coal shovel and tried desperately smashing a window to pull the children out himself. The old glass was thick and stubborn, and it refused to break. He ran for his 2 coal delivery trucks, hoping to drive one beside the house so he could climb toward the trapped children's window. Neither truck would start. Those exact same trucks had run perfectly fine the day before. Now, on the one single night it truly mattered, both engines sat completely dead in the driveway. A neighbor raced inside to call the fire department for help. The phone line was completely dead, the very same line that had carried that strange call earlier. Someone finally drove into town to fetch help in person instead. But the fire department, stationed only miles away, still took more than 7 agonizing hours to arrive. By the time the trucks finally arrived, there was nothing left worth saving. The house had collapsed into a smoking, blackened pit where a family's home once stood. When the ashes finally cooled enough to search, crews combed through every single inch of debris looking for the 5 missing children. What they found was absolutely nothing. No skeletons turned up, no skulls, no bone fragments of any size at all. 5 children were simply gone, as if the fire had erased every trace of them. The local fire chief quickly ruled it faulty wiring and closed the case within days. George and Ginny could never accept that answer. Something about it felt deeply wrong. They eventually brought in an actual chemist who explained that bone needs extreme, sustained heat to fully disintegrate, heat a typical wood frame house fire almost never reaches. If the fire truly hadn't burned hot enough to destroy bone, then where exactly were 5 children's bodies? The Sodders started asking questions nobody in town wanted answered. Then strangers slowly started coming forward. A woman running a tourist stop near Charleston swore she'd served breakfast to 5 children matching the Sodders that very morning. She described a car with out-of-state plates and children who looked genuinely frightened of the men they were traveling with. By the time she called anyone, they were gone. Another witness recalled a strange car idling near the Sodder house the night before the fire, its driver just watching, saying nothing before slowly pulling away. Investigators later searched the yard and found something odd in the debris, a hard rubber object shaped almost like a small pineapple. It matched nothing in the household. Military experts who examined the object identified it as a type of incendiary device used overseas during the war. Not a toy, not household debris, a genuine weapon. Rumors swirled for years that George had made real enemies. He'd spoken out loudly against Benito Mussolini, angering local Italian immigrants who still admired the fascist dictator. Some believed the fire wasn't an accident at all, that it was retaliation meant to punish George, or worse, cover for a kidnapping planned well in advance. The Sodders never once stopped searching for their children. They mailed countless letters, chased leads that led nowhere, and refused the quiet closure their town kept offering. In 1968, 23 long years after the fire, an envelope arrived with no return address at all. Inside was a photograph of a grown man in his 30s. He looked eerily like their son Louis might have looked all grown up. On the back, someone had scrawled a cryptic note only the family could possibly recognize. George hired a private investigator to trace the mysterious photograph's origin. The lead went cold almost immediately, disappearing the same way everything else about that night did. Desperate to keep the case alive, the family put up a large billboard along Route 16, showing the 5 missing faces beneath a standing cash reward. Drivers passing through Fayetteville saw those 5 young faces for decades afterward. Maurice, Martin, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, frozen forever at the ages they vanished that night. Jenny kept a small, worn photo of her children tucked in a kitchen drawer, waiting, she always said, for the day the telephone would finally ring with real news. George died in 1969, never once accepting the official story the town had settled on. He went to his grave, certain his children hadn't burned, but had been taken. Jenny lived another 20 years after him, keeping that billboard standing until she finally passed away in 1989, still quietly waiting for an answer that never came. To this day, not a single bone has ever been recovered from that fire. No credible arrest was ever made in connection with the children's disappearance. The official fire marshal's report and the family's own gathered evidence still directly contradict each other, decades after nearly everyone involved that night has passed away. Some researchers call it a simple, tragic accident, a fast, unusually hot house fire, and a grieving family's mind quietly inventing conspiracy out of unbearable loss. Others point to the missing ladder, the dead phone lines, the incendiary device, and the eyewitness sightings, insisting 5 children genuinely walked out of that house alive. The billboard finally came down years ago, replaced now by newer roads and a town that has mostly moved on. But the questions it raised never really left. Just 5 names carved permanently into one family's memory, and a fire that somehow left nothing solid behind to bury and nothing behind to properly mourn. Maybe the real horror here isn't that a house simply burned down on Christmas Eve. Maybe it's that someone, somewhere, might have known exactly where those children went. And for reasons we may never fully understand, that someone chose to stay silent, letting a grieving mother and father search every day for the rest of their lives. The Sodder case remains open in the coldest possible sense of that word, unsolved, unresolved, and utterly unforgettable, one of America's strangest unexplained disappearances. If stories like this one, The ones with no bodies, no real closure, and no rest for the families left behind. Pull you in. Subscribe for more true, unexplained cases.